Incredible.
What
Yeah.
happens to John?
So
I'm
John
nervous about
goes.
this pain in my side.
John goes to Katmai National Park in Alaska, and he adopts a fat bear.
Ah,
Yeah.
and they become the Canadian Olympic curling team.
Yeah, and then they ended up doing this whole Netflix show, and
Yep.
it goes on for I don't know, like 87 hours, just all about the relationship between
Yeah.
nippleless John and the fat bear.
And ChatGPT thought it was about the rainforest.
Yeah.
It was never about the rainforest.
And we're right back where we started.
And I said, rewrite all of that.
Chris, we landed Ann Handley. She's right here. This is already a great day. I am thrilled to welcome Ann Handley herself to having a conversation with us here on this podcast. I had a brain crush on Ann years before I met her. Honored to say that we've become friends over time, and just a pleasure, because this is a person that we all need to learn from on topics related to voice and tone and genuine connections and authenticity. If you haven't gotten it yet, you need this. I've been talking about it all week. Everybody writes it in its second edition. It's much more than you might think it is. Pick up a copy and look at the table of contents, and you will immediately get pulled in to some of those really important things that are relevant to all of us. They're universal. Anyway, Ann, thank you for joining us.
Anyway, thank you. I'm honored to be here with you both. The C team. Does anybody call you the C team?
They do now.
The Karstadina. It's Karstadina. It's like the Karstadina. Yeah.
I've been on the C team my whole life, Ann.
The C team, yeah. Right under the B team.
All right, let's go with Karstadina. That's better.
That works.
Yeah.
Well, Ann, we've got some topics for you. Some things we've been talking about already here a bit today. Things that you've been a calming voice for me as I've seen your posts on LinkedIn. Chris, let's dive in. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think what we were talking about in the intro was that it's very possible that you snap your fingers and it's 3 months from now and we have a tsunami of content, and it creates kind of like this layer of synthetic content that's basically somehow serves as a foundation of how we've communicated. And now we bring on Ann, who is the professor of authenticity. And what happens here, Ann, when it seems like tectonic plates that are shifting? How do these worlds collide?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that that's not what we're going to see in 3 months. I mean, I'm doing my darndest to prevent that from happening. So, but, I'm one person. I don't know. It could happen, but I sincerely hope not. I mean, I actually got a note from someone who works in marketing at a big company the other day. And she was responding to one of my newsletters, and which was about AI in writing, and she said, "So I just got out of a meeting with my boss, and his idea was, hey, let's just fire all those freelancers who we have on retainer. Let's just have Chat GPT just go ahead and write everything for us. And how does that sound? And we ought to save a lot of money with that." And I was like, So she's asking me for advice, and I was just like, no, it's not a good idea to do that, especially not right now. I don't think 3 months from now either. So it's a hard pass. So I tried to give her the language and the argument to go back to her boss and say this isn't a good idea because, and using some of the words that you just used, Chris, because this isn't a tool that we want to just hand over the keys to our content kingdom to. Instead, it's a tool that we want to use. So as I've been talking about on LinkedIn, it's a tool, but what matters when you have any kind of tool, it's who is wielding the tool. How are you using it? Can it be powerful for us? Sure, but that doesn't mean that it should be wholesale just implemented and humans should be completely hands off. That's just hands off. That's just kind of that's terrifying to me, that kind of I don't know, dystopian kind of society and dystopian kind of marketing world anyway, and I hope that's not where we're headed. And again, I'm trying to counter that the best that I can.
Thanks for pushing back and for standing up for humans. Someone needs to.
Yeah, and listen, I get it. Like, there's a lot of hype out there around, you know, not just ChatGPT, but lots of different AI writing tools and platforms. And I mean, they're fun. Like, they're fun to use, and it's a little bit, you know, it can feel really like, holy wow, like when you input a few prompts and you get back something that is reasonably articulate. Which is, you know, I mean, so it's fun, it's a toy, but it's a tool. And again, I think we have to remember who is holding the tool. It's important for us as marketers to be empowered by these tools rather than having these tools, you know, cut us off at the legs. And that's what I worry about, mostly from a senior leadership standpoint. Because senior leaders are the ones who are, you know, hearing all this hype, maybe reading on LinkedIn, you know, seeing those carousels of 30 different slides that can go by and show you how to get the best work by asking GPT, you know, by using the right prompts with ChatGPT. And I feel like that there's a lot of confusion and chaos, and so I'm trying to let's take it down.
Well, it doesn't feel authentic, right? I mean, these watered down. How do you describe the voice of ChatGPT? Sort of like accurate, but so qualified. The messages are, I mean, the intros are not, it's not Anne. There's no voice.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. I think of the voice of ChatGPT and a lot of AI tools too. Like, we're talking a lot about ChatGPT, but that's only one of the of the tools that are out there. And I think it's because it's free and it's had such momentum recently. But, you know, I think all of the writing tools, like, to me, they have such a sure bravado, even if they don't know what the heck they're talking about. It could be completely wrong, but they say it with such confidence that you're like, well, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So, you know, I think it's incumbent on all of us in marketing to, number one, be able to recognize what is good writing so that we know when it comes back to us and it has this sort of air of bravado about it, but it's not very well written. And to me, it's not just about the accuracy of something, but also like the authenticity, the lack of a voice, all of those things. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I think is really funny about these tools is, you know, I've played with them. I've put some of my posts into it and like challenged it in a way just to sort of see how is it going to react to my stuff. I use a lot of metaphors when I write. So, for example, recently I wrote a piece about parrot sentences, parrot words, parrot paragraphs. In other words, words, paragraphs, sentences that don't add anything new to your text, don't add anything new to, say, a blog post or an essay or an article that you're writing, but instead just sort of restate what's already been said. So I call those parrot sentences, parrot words. And so I loaded that into ChatGPT. I asked it to then generate like a number of A, headlines, and B, like social posts, like to amplify the piece. And it completely missed the point. Like, it gave me all this stuff about the rainforest because parrots. It gave me, like, it was completely humorless, number one. And number two, it just, like, it didn't pick up on the metaphor. I was like, no, parrots are a metaphor. ChatGPT, do you see? And it was just like, I don't really know what you're talking about. I was like, no, it's all right. Step back. A metaphor is something that we use to explain another thing that's a little more complex. And oh my gosh, and poor ChatGPT was just like in a meltdown. By the end, we had a big therapy session, and ChatGPT was like, I'm sorry, I don't know metaphors. I was like, I know, friend, it's okay. And, you know, I just had to hug that little robot and be like, you're good. We're good. You're going to get there. I don't think it is going to get there, but I didn't want to crush its spirit, you know?
Very nice of you. That's sweet.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you probably had 10 things I wanted to ask you about, but I think one of the things that
Parrots, about parrots and rainforests.
about parrots, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's
I'm an
yeah,
expert
that'll
now.
probably be the next 30 minutes is wildlife in the Brazilian rainforest. Is just the ability to accept it. You just type in a prompt, press enter, and then go. Like the amount of inaccuracies that it's already widely known for saying and doing and things like that. I watched Scott Galloway interviewed by Anderson Cooper, and Anderson Cooper goes, here's my guest, and he introduces the guest and he says, we're going to be talking about ChatGPT, and guess what? I wrote this entire intro on ChatGPT. What do you think? And Scott's like, well, about 30% of that is incorrect. I only have, I don't know what it's like. I only have 3 books, not 5. I'm not an expert in this. I'm not an expert in an AI, stuff like that. And it was just so easily just digestible where you're just like, okay, good. This solves a problem. Go. And it's just like, did anyone think, is it right? And then what happens when a wave of this stuff comes out? And then the next question is, who's going to be the emperor of truth? That's going to go back and try to figure out all of this content that's out in the world. Well, now we have this proliferation of content and no one knows whether it's accurate because we got so click happy. It's scary, right? I mean, that's a big concern that I have is like, who's checking the checker?
That's a problem. Anne's point about the lack of voice is a problem. But this is early days, right? It seems
Yes,
like it's
right.
so young. It's
Yeah.
so young. We have to remember that, like, this has really just popped on people's radar, like,
Yeah.
last 5 months? When was this? Like, this is very new.
Mid-December was when the latest
Yeah,
iteration
3 months.
of GPT
But
came out. So, yeah, these are early days for sure.
We were talking about the overreaction though, Andy.
Yeah. The hype,
BuzzFeed fired these people within a month of this coming out, and their stock went up. Anne's getting letters. Anne's getting letters
gross.
of like somebody at the top level management says we can just let these people go, and so like it's the overreaction that scares me just as much as the, all of the inaccuracy and things like that. Now, every time I sound like a doubter, I have played with the tool, and if you're willing to really invest the time, you can get a great output.
Yeah.
But it's very funny because there's people that type and there's people that dictate. I got really into like dictating into my phone. But when I measured how many inaccuracies it had and then going in and correcting it versus just typing it in, I may have saved 5%. You know what I mean? And so that's this weird thing with AI is that you're going to have this time saving, but the amount of proofreading and double checking and just doing all those things, even put your voice on top, it's like you might have saved time, but if you're doing it right, it's not as much as you think.
Well,
does that make sense?
a point. Well, yeah, and you've talked about that, right? Like this is like an assistant sitting on your shoulder.
Yeah.
This is a helper.
Right.
It's not a replacement.
Right.
It's going to support you in certain tasks. It's not a content strategist. It is currently in best used as an assistant. I've seen it. I've tried using it to write headlines. And I think that's actually a fun way to use it is to give it a big body of text.
Yes.
Yep.
And then ask it about the text. What's a good keyword for this? What's a good headline for this? What's a good social post for this?
Yeah.
Way more interesting than just putting in short prompts.
Unless you're using metaphor, I would not suggest that.
You get a rainforest article.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the way that I've been counseling people to use it, and the way that I've been using it also, is for that kind of stuff, Andy. So, so for headlines, meta descriptions, it's great for that. So, more broadly, use it at the beginning of the process of a writing process. So, you sort of have a goal in mind, and then use it for research, use it for iterating, use it for ideating maybe. The writing piece, though, in the middle, I think has to be all you as a creator, as a writer, as a marketer, as a business person. And then at the end, using it for things like, giving it a cursory, like once over for grammar, headlines, certainly, meta descriptions, just, little things like that. But the human element is still, so critical. And not only during the writing, but, right before you do all the headline and the meta description and all that, My favorite technique, my favorite tactic is always read your work out loud, like literally just sing it out in the middle of your office, because that can also just catch some things that are very robot-esque, or it makes you sound like you're reporting a 5-car pileup on the freeway instead of communicating in your loose, honest, authentic voice. So things like that. So I think there's absolutely a use for it right now. But to back up what you said too, these are very, very early days. We may get there. Like, I actually kind of look forward to the day when this little robot friend is, perched on my shoulder saying, you tend to overuse that metaphor quite a bit. I think you used parrot back in like 1962, didn't you? It's a smoker somehow. I don't know why. Maybe because my first editor was a smoker, so I associate that. But
Yeah, I think there was like years ago, I heard an interview with one of the original Wired editors, and they were talking about AI and what's going to happen. Is it going to replace entire jobs? And the argument was sort of like, no, it replaces small tasks first.
Yeah.
But it came out sort of as a prophecy, and I never forgot this. He said, the last job to be done by a robot will be that of the comedian. Humorless, right? Like, it's not going to, it's never.
I love that, yeah.
Will it ever have a voice? Like, that prophecy, I think, may come true, or maybe it's going to be hilarious next year. I doubt it, but.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yep.
I haven't seen ChatGPT be funny at all, so. Maybe that's why I don't really relate to it now that I think about it. Or why I don't relate to the writing in general that it produces, because it is humorless, and it's like, I said, it's like very. It's very sure. It's like it has the confidence of the righteous. It's like, this is how it is, and we're gonna go with it. I don't know, friend. I don't think that's true.
It is funny how you can ask it to write in the tone of, I see people typing in everything from Gary Vaynerchuk to Mitch Hedberg to whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that part's pretty interesting, that it can convert and it can do those things.
Yeah, it doesn't do it very well though, because I've asked it to write it in the tone of me, and it isn't able to do that. So
I think though what the next iteration will do, and this is what Bard will be able to do though, is that the more you input, the better the result will be. And so when you can literally give it links of everything you've written, every video you've done and stuff like that, and you basically let it absorb, it's going to develop this personality that's like, unfortunately, a synthetic you. And then you will be able to write with a bigger tool set, because, we sort of like the sound of our own voice, our own ideas, our own data, our own research. And that's where I think it could actually bring value to the people that do have something to authentically say. And so that should be interesting, because we were talking about before the show about just this plugin that it has. And I was saying, it says outrank any article, but what I was telling Andy is I was actually using it on my own stuff.
That's smart.
Because I was getting it to basically learn a little bit more about me. And then as I asked further questions, because it stays contextual, it sounded a little bit more like me. You know what I mean? And so it takes a lot of dancing before you can get it.
Probably a great marketing tactic. Just go take some old articles that used to rank, copy and paste them into these tools and say, make this a more keyword focused article. That'll probably work. That's probably efficient, probably a good idea. Not at all about connecting with people, not at all relevant to our last conversation with Mark Schaefer about building community to make competition irrelevant. And it reminds me of a conversation I literally had in a bar around the corner from here, where a friend of mine said the last thing, or one thing that it can't do, or a job that won't be outsourced, is the job of making people feel special. There is no, so yeah, efficiencies in writing, great. Rewriting old articles, great. Some, SEO copy edits, go for it. But where is there going to still always be a role for those of us who try to make, for the personal connection, for the networking, the relationship building,
right.
That, but then again, that New York Times piece we all just saw, where the guy started to have this mini romance with Bing.
Yeah.
Scary. Yeah. Maybe I'm scared that people will actually start to feel a connection to this thing, and then it's going to have a negative social impact, like social media potentially. Like, it's kind of scary if lonely people start to, think that they're having a relationship with an algorithm. But mostly, I think anyone who focuses on relationships and humanity and authenticity and personal connections will have a long, successful career in those regards. And chat and AI, or do you agree? AI won't affect that? Isn't relevant to that?
I think that the idea of that personal connection has always been central to content. At least the way that I've always thought about content.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And
Yes.
so yeah, I mean, in my mind, it's everything, right? It's the foundation. Like, your relationship with your subscriber is the foundation of your business, or the relationship with your reader, or with your prospect, with one person at one time, is the foundation of your marketing. I've always believed that, and so I guess I feel that these tools may increase efficiency. They may even help me at some point with some writing tasks, but I don't think it'll ever shortcut relationships. Like, you can't prompt your way to relationships, is how I think about it. And I wholeheartedly, believe that. I feel that, we may get to the point where people have a relationship with a robot, but, I don't know that that's really going to serve most of us in terms of how we think about using our words and our content and our text to connect with those who matter the most to us. That's where I come down on it anyway. I do think that it places a higher value on things like tone of voice, like we've kind of, we've talked about a little bit here today, but didn't really dig into it. I think it places a higher value on tone of voice. I want companies to think about voice as a differentiator. I mean, I've been talking about that for a while now, but I think in an era of generative AI, it's so critical to think about your voice, because that human accessible component of how you communicate and showing the actual people behind your business, their actual voices, their actual faces, all of that, I think is going to, I think if anything, there's even more reason to think about that now. Highlight the people within your organization. Let them communicate with their authentic voices, or encourage them. Help them evolve their own writing voices. And so I think all of that, means that it's generative AI means that all of that is only more critical now. And I also think about the tactics that we use in marketing now. So things like email newsletters, which again is something I've been talking about for a long time. Like, in my mind, that's a great place to focus on creating those connections with your audience and nurturing those relationships, because, that's one area where you can truly show your humanity. It's one person to one person writing to one person at one time.
I also think that, and you mentioned this, I watched a video on you, you were talking about your newsletter, and the fact that email is kind of like the last frontier where it's not exactly algorithm centric. It's kind of like, and so it's funny how we can try to pretend like we don't write for Google, but we have been writing for Google for so long we forgot that we were writing for Google. And the newsletter is actually very refreshing, because you don't have to worry about the algorithm. Oh, do I got to put this word in my H2? Do I got to do all these things? You can just write for writing's sake. And, that's one of those things, at least from my standpoint as a content marketer. It's like I've always been shackled by Google making me talk the way they wanted me to talk so that words would index.
Yeah, I've talked about email as disintermediation, because big tech isn't between you and your audience. And that word is so long and boring compared to, and you call email the Rocky Balboa of marketing. Compare tone, right? This is a case study in tone. Andy calls it disintermediation and calls it the Rocky Balboa of marketing. But that's kind of the point, right? Is that there's no gatekeeper, right? It's a person. Email is not owned by anybody. The person raised their hand. They said, "I want more from you," and you share more with them.
Right. Yeah. It's the only place where people and not algorithms are deciding what you're seeing. And that's a place that I want to be as a marketer. Like, I want to be in the inbox of somebody who's like, heck yes, take my precious email address. Here, I hand it over to you. And if you abuse it, like, guess what? Like, one click and I'm gone. I love that bar is so high.
Yeah.
Like, as a marketer, I love that. And so,
Yeah.
I think email is vastly undervalued by so many brands. Like, we all know, like, we've all seen the stats of just about how it like it generates the most ROI of like any marketing channel. All that's like, we know that, but I think there's a disconnect between us knowing that and then the way that we're showing up on email is like they're almost from two different camps.
Yep.
So I've been, as Andy knows, I've been talking about email for a long time now, but especially email newsletters, because it's such a grand opportunity.
The challenge is that it lives in the same pool. It lives in the same swamp as a whole bunch of other spam. And so one of the things that you do very well is that you've earned the right to be heard with your content, things like that, and they're actually opting in. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so that's kind of the barrier here, because unfortunately, I think that with AI writing, you're going to also see a massive increase in spam.
Oh,
and
sure.
They're gonna, and then the other robots that are fighting spam,
Yep.
we're going to live in this very weird world of like, oh, you didn't get my message because they calibrated
that-
the anti-spam rule so high that now, like, well, you haven't talked to Andy in nearly 3 weeks. He might think that you're marketing to him.
Yeah, and do you think that like the robots are going to get good at like, checking the squares that have stoplights in them? That kind of
Oh my
test.
gosh.
Which
that
has
they
a
get?
bus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Click
Yeah.
click the squares that has a bus. Yeah, click the squares that has a stoplight in it. Like, I can imagine a world where, one robot throws that up and the other robot checks it, and then I don't know, where are we in that scenario?
Yeah.
That's an old story. I mean, these algorithms versus algorithms. But back to the connection and the networking and the personal relationships and the trust and the authenticity. And you've said something to me once that I never forgot. I've written a lot of articles about how to increase email open rates with subject lines and timing and pre-header text, and we've all talked about these things. But you said once that the most important factor in email open rates is the sender name.
Yeah, the from line matters
The
more
from
than-
line,
Yeah.
right? You actually it is a relationship. So how do you get someone to whitelist your emails? Trust,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And then you're past the algorithm. But
Yeah.
I think that also is relevant to the conversation about synthetic content. Chris, I love that term. And the and spam and the coming deluge of low quality stuff is just that relationship and the sender name. Optimize the sender name. How do you optimize for the sender name? Love, care,
Yeah.
like empathy, trust,
Yeah.
attention, respect.
Affinity, showing people who you are, letting them be seen. Yeah, it's building a relationship. It's setting expectations for people, like, what are you going to deliver, and are you always going to over deliver? I've evolved the metrics that I track for my own email newsletter for the precise reasons that you're talking about. That there are no great metrics. Like, we all can optimize a subject line, and we all can measure clicks and opens, but how do we measure these in my mind, more critical metrics? So things like I call it my open to write back rate. How do we actually optimize for that? There are some email programs that will that can track the RR rate, they call it, the response rate. But I like OBR better, open to OWBR, open to write back rate. Yeah. So those are things that I track. I encourage people to write back to me. Why? Because this is not a broadcast. It's not about the news, right? It's about the letter. So I want people to write back to my letter. And if I have fewer than 100 OBRs on my list of almost 50,000 subscribers, then I wonder, like, what went wrong? Why didn't I inspire people to write back to me? So that's one example of a very specific metric that I track as a measure of the trust, the affinity, the authenticity, the relationship itself.
Wait a minute. I'm so sorry. 100 people write back, and then
Yeah.
you write back to them again? How do you turn the faucet
Yeah,
off?
I
I'm
try.
sorry.
I mean,
I just walked into your world and I'm like, oh my God.
I was wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I don't write back a novel. I'm not an Andy Crestodina who then you ask him a simple question and you get a and then it turns up as a blog post like in another,
It does.
another year
That's
and a half.
his system.
Yeah, that's
It's
his
a
system. Like total respect. I don't do that necessarily. Sometimes I just acknowledge it, but yeah, I mean, I set aside time. I have a system in place where I respond systematically. I try, I should say. I think for the most part, I execute on that. Every once in a while, I have just an insane week and I just can't get to it. But,
They don't have expectations.
listen to me. I'm feeling bad about it. Like, it's
You
like,
should not feel bad.
Yeah, I know.
you just triggered me, Chris.
Back to the rainforest.
I've got a question about topics and tone. So, of all the formats that we can all use every day in anything that we do, one of them is the strong opinion, the op-ed piece. It's never been part of my content strategy. I've virtually never published anything that was strong opinion. I might kind of spice up a piece with just some stronger tone, but I'm mostly like a technical writer, like how to, my last one was like how to do a content audit using GA4. Very. I think chat probably could do my job sometimes, but not yours. And so, what about will strong opinion and taking a stand be more differentiated content in the context of an ocean of synthetic content?
That's an interesting idea. I mean, I would imagine so. I need to think about that through a little bit. I mean, I feel like there has been a content strategy for a number of us, right? A number of marketers. I'm just thinking this through a little bit. The idea of having a strong point of view, a recognizable point of view. I mean, yes, I do think that's probably accurate. I mean, I guess to some degree, you do that, Andy, whether you think of it or not. Like, I don't know if that you would qualify it as like a strong point of view, but like in my mind, you have a very definitive way of thinking about specific things. Like, and you can, like, the way you put it out there, I think can be very definitive too. So I don't know. I think you actually, I do think you do that right now. Like, for example, one of the things you talk about, don't put your testimonials on a testimonial page. That's a waste. Like, instead, scatter it throughout your site. Like, that kind of thing. Like, that to me is a very particular point of view, isn't it?
But I like the way Andy does. He makes these data-driven arguments, and then your opinion comes later. So it's not like you're trying to earn the right to be heard at a general level. Like, okay, this is Andy, and I'll trust everything he says. It's almost like he's fighting for their trust with every idea, and that's where it's really cool because the data supports your argument. And so that, I've been reading you for years, Andy, and that's the always.
You guys are sweet. I wasn't fishing for a compliment. I really don't.
Take the poster off my wall.
Op-ed is a specific. So here's where I'm going with it. Thought leadership is a categorically different format. It is when you are you're coming out for something and therefore a little bit coming out against something. You're actually your ideas are pulling people forward. You're not saying something because people are asking it necessarily. You're saying something that you believe people need to know, people should hear. You didn't start with keyword research. It's like Mark, he said, don't build an audience, build a community. Very strong statement, right? It's actually counter narrative. Great thought leadership is sort of counter narrative opinion or drawing a line in the sand. I don't plant flags. I'm telling you where to put your testimonials. It's not, you know what I mean? Like, thought leadership, there's a difference.
But I also think that, don't you think thought leadership is really about the leader? Because it's who's saying it, right? Again, I think it comes back to the trust, the authenticity, the person who is, adopting that point of view versus just the point of view itself. Do you know what I mean? I think it all trickles back to the person who's writing, the person who's creating the content to begin with. So yes, I mean, I think having a strong point of view may be a differentiator, but ultimately I think it's really the person is the differentiator, not the opinion. You know what I mean?
I think there's some bravery in that, though, because what I'm surprised about is just specifically in the last 7 or 8 years that you walk into a very divided room, and I find myself guarded on saying things, I mean, not politically, politically, other things like that, and it's just like, it's almost like if you believe this, that you're wholeheartedly this. And if you believe this, you're wholeheartedly this. And so when you say a strong opinion, I find like the world is like, oh, you're one of them. And you're like, I just said one opinion about one thing about, you know what I mean? And so that's always my fear about, like, having a strong opinion, right? Because I'm just like, you know what? I'm a very gray person. You know what I mean?
I know, but we don't want gray. We want black.
I
and
know.
white. That's what we're on social media, right? The black, not the gray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll make a case for strong opinion on mundane topics. I was in a literally same bar. You guys should meet me there. We should all
Wow.
be. Yeah.
You drink a lot, huh?
Yeah, it's just been like I took an event,
Long
like a bunch
winter?
of
Long
smart
winter.
friendly marketers all meet at this bar once a month.
Oh,
Anyway,
nice.
strong
That sounds
opinion.
fun.
It's like take a stand. It works well. There's lots of data supporting this. And we all kind of like felt depressed for a minute, like, oh yeah, gun control, politics, and the conversation kind of ebbed. And then someone brought up the Oxford comma, and a fight broke out. People were like, swinging, throwing punches. I think that strong opinion actually can be, you can get the same triggering response sometimes from very simple things.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
I published a piece on LinkedIn as well as in my newsletter, and it was a chart about what's in, what's out. Do you know? I don't know if you saw it. It was
Oh, yeah, I
linked-
did.
Linked to
I
it
saw
in
that.
the
And
show notes,
I use a lot of your what's outs, and I was like, I'm that guy.
Yeah. Let's share that. It's great. I saw that.
Yeah, it was and one of the it just triggered it because one of them was the Oxford comma, and I said, Oxford comma is in basically, and man, that just got the most amount of action out of anything on the list. It was like 17, 18 things on this list, and that was the one that people really honed in on. So
Dip your
so
toes
fun.
in the water. Strong
Yeah.
opinion. You can start small with strong opinion. AI will never have a stance on the Oxford comma. I don't think so. For me, it comes down to AP, Associated Press, versus AH, Ann Handley. There's a battle there. I'm on the AP. I don't want to go back and edit
don't
500
use it?
articles, so I'm
No?
on the
Okay.
AP team
That's
now.
fine.
But that's I think that it's a case study, right? It's you can start to add something oomph to your content by just coming out for something and against something, even if it's not wildly controversial. People have strong opinions about all kinds of things.
It's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the day where people lost their minds because Pluto was no longer a planet.
Yeah, exactly. Who cares? Chunk of ice in space. What? Don't tell me what my chunk of ice is called.
How dare you? I'm like, oh my God. You know what I mean?
oh my goodness, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was talking about with my team was, and we brought up two of them, and you, in your writing, and you talk about a third one, is that Andy was saying before, I think it was one of your blogs where you're saying that, it's either strong opinion or independent data-driven research. But the third one is actually utility. And the websites that are getting a lot of traffic are actually the ones that are, whether it's, usually they're building a utility that you can come and get an output for. It's funny because people are like talking about ChatGPT creating these headlines. I used to use these other tools on websites that were headline creators all the time because I was just bad at doing it. So this is just one other tool that was doing what I was finding, before.
I'm
But
bad at
when we-
headlines too.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
insecurity for
Really?
me. Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah.
You heard
I
it here,
know.
people.
I know.
Exactly.
I just,
Yeah.
this is my problem because again, sorry, I didn't mean to derail your question, Chris, but I get into, because I get so deep into metaphor that I want the headline to be too clever for my own good. And people just have no idea what it means. So, like here's an example. I talk about this in my book, actually, that one of my biggest, errors, embarrassments ever was a headline that I put on my own blog called Copywriting Lessons from an Unbearable Campaign. And when you hear that out of context, it's, what does that actually mean? What's unbearable? What is that?
I see.
And it was actually about Fat Bear Week, which is an elimination an elimination
Back to the
contest.
rainforest.
No, actually Alaska, that they have at the Katmai National Park in Alaska, in which they pit it's an elimination contest where they have fat bears. Like you have to vote for your favorite fat bear. Anyway, it's all about getting the fattest bear is more likely to survive the winter. So it's not fat shaming. It's actually it's a positive thing. Anyway, that's what I wrote about, and I wrote about it because they shared the profiles of each bear, and they gave them like this beautiful write-up, and I just related to these bears so hard, and bears aren't, I don't have a particular affection for them or an affinity by any stretch, but man, after I read all their profiles, I was like, heck yes, Mildred, I am voting for you.
Yep.
Yes, we're going to go to the end, girl. Single mother of 2 little cubs. One of them has a club foot. What?
Yep.
That's how much I got into it. So, all that to say, that was the headline on Bearable Campaign. And it just made no sense. And it did so poorly, and it was such a great article, I thought. Full of pathos, full of Mildred and her club-footed cub. I mean, it was just so much about it. And it was an epic fail. So that's why I'm bad at headlines. Long story that has like nothing to do with Chris's question, but that's why.
I just see you stopping people in the supermarket. You're like, let me tell you about Mildred.
Did you read this? Just come here. Do you have a phone? Just take
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
I was
I'll
canvassing
text
for
it to you.
Mildred in my neighborhood. I was going door to door. I was like, vote for her. She deserves it.
Well, that's the same thing that happens in the Olympics. So, like, I don't watch any of the sports that are in the Olympics for 4 years. And then you see...
And then you care
you see this girl, and she's lining up. I've never
yeah.
met her name, but before the race, it's like... And this is Monica, and her mom drove her to track practice every day for 4 years, and she got leukemia. And like 2 minutes later, I'm like, if she doesn't win, I'm gonna lose my mind. You know what I mean? I'm like, she takes off, like, you run. Come on, America!
Yeah, he's like waving a towel. Let's go.
That's the power. The Olympics have me like, I'm like the target audience of like, I'm willing to listen if they're willing to like draw me in.
Yeah, that tiny story,
oh
right?
my
It's a
God,
little bit, we should deconstruct that to make something passionate really boring for my next article. How do they do that, right?
Yeah.
There's characters, there's conflict, right? There's a bit of a history. There's kind of like, this is the underdog, there's sacrifice, there's struggle. And 90 seconds later, you care a lot.
Yeah. And they do that with those hidden boss shows too. Like, she just works in the mailroom. I get it that she has a peg leg, and you know what I mean? But like, there's tears running down. The end, he gives her a check, and you're like, that doesn't happen at my office at all. You know what I mean? Anyhow, let me get back to the original question now that
there was a question in there somewhere, wasn't there?
Yep.
I'm thinking about Andy's 90-second deconstructing a story, though. We should do something with that.
Let's go back and watch some of those old Olympics. I think, Chris, you're right. That's a great case study in how to make someone care a lot in a very short time.
And never
video,
remember him
which
again.
helps. Yeah.
And never remember him again.
Yeah, right. You've got a favorite curler in the world of winter sport for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's relatable though. Suddenly, like, I think whether you're talking about a fat bear or whether you're talking about an Olympian, it's those elements that they're teasing out that helps you relate to this character who is, either literally a fat bear or who is this world-class athlete who we cannot possibly, like, what do we have in common with her? Like, literally nothing. But when they deconstruct her story and pull out some human elements and they tease out a couple of emotional tangents, then suddenly we're like all in on that. And so, I think it's kind of textbook just, we talk about this all the time in marketing, but, you need that story. And I know, I know that can feel like a high bar sometimes, but essentially all we're doing is just pulling out one or two relatable moments, you know?
Keeping it real. And it's a case study on how quickly we can feel a connection, how little it takes. It's like art does this, movies, shows, where character development sometimes takes less than a minute before you feel like you know a lot about this person and you care a lot about them. It's like character development in screenwriting, kind of similar.
And you know where you're seeing this is it's really funny too because
Dating apps? Are you thinking dating apps?
Always.
Sorry. No,
He's
sorry.
always,
Yeah.
again.
I thought that's where he was going to go.
all right, you got my
You know where I see this? I see this on Tinder. That's where I see it.
Hey, there's another, that could be another interesting topic. I'm nowhere near
Right.
that world, but
I'm not either, but yeah.
No, but my argument is that movies versus series, like I barely watch any movies anymore because my heart is drawn to character development and knowing and
Yeah.
knowing the ride longer. And so I'm actually amazed at some of the movies that got you there in 2 hours because it's like the funniest thing in the world and people don't even think about this. But if I'm like, Andy, have you ever seen Sopranos? And you're like, no. I'm like, you should spend 87 hours watching it. You're crazy? You haven't seen that? You know what I mean? It's like, I think Sopranos is 87 hours. Have you told someone to do something for 87 hours in your whole life? You know what I mean? But this Netflix mantra has done this thing where you're like, I need to do that. Because I think that our hearts and our minds do gravitate to the story. And the longer the story, the more in depth you know the characters, the bumpier the rides and the the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
it's interesting, and I think
Yeah.
that story is impacting us in a different way than it was before streaming. I think streaming has taught us a little bit more about story.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's, sometimes I put off reading the end of a really good book because I don't want to lose my friends, I don't want to lose the characters.
oh, that's sweet.
It's true. So sometimes I'll hold on to the last chapter until finally, like, I just have to do it. But yeah, when you form that connection with a character, it does feel like a real relationship.
Yeah.
Well, to get back to my boring and tactical marketing tips, that's actually the power of testimonials is to put a character on every page. I mean, it's as a rule, you could almost say like every web page should have a person on it. Pages, lots of websites, it looks like a neutron bomb went off. Like, where are the people? It's like an abandoned
Oh, I love
spaceship or
that.
something.
Yeah. You
It's
could use that as a metric. One person per page.
a person on every page, a face, a real face, not a stock
Yeah.
photo. Could
Yeah.
be. It could be a point of view of one of your team members, by the way. People always ask, oh, I can't get testimonials. Hey, get a quote from your founder or get a quote from someone who cares about something and just change that. It's like every message has a messenger, and the messenger doesn't have to be this faceless body copy text. Put a face and put quotes around things. I've said this. The quotation marks are the most powerful key on your keyboard. Put something in quotes and it just feels different. That's again, coming back to voice.
Yeah, and don't edit it. Like I see this, some of my favorite social accounts use the words of their employees, use the words of their customers, their patients, whatever, their clients, and they use their real words. Like they don't edit it and make it sound shorter and pithier and bitier. Instead, they just use it. And one of my favorites is UCLA Health does this a lot, where they'll share the story of someone who was in their system or went through their system or had some kind of procedure, dealt with some kind of challenge, and they'll tell that person's story. It almost reads like a Humans of New York kind of story, like a block of text that's straight from that individual. It's just so much more powerful than adopting this kind of third-party narrative, and it's like, well, John Monroe had breast cancer at the age of 35. It's unusual for a man, however, he persevered. Like, that is like, it has no emotion to me, but when John is like, damn, couldn't believe it. How many men get breast cancer? I did. What? It's not, John is not real. That's just an example, but it's the kind of thing. Don't worry
I'm worried
about
John right now,
Yeah,
actually.
because I just got you invested in
I'm
this
starting
story.
to have feelings about this story. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a character,
I know.
there's conflict.
Yeah, incredible.
What
Yeah.
happens to John?
So
I'm
John
nervous about
goes.
this pain in my side.
John goes to Katmai National Park in Alaska, and he adopts a fat bear. Yeah.
And they become the Canadian Olympic curling team.
Yeah, and then they ended up doing this whole Netflix show, and it goes on for, I don't know, like 87 hours, just all about the relationship between nippleless John and the fat bear.
And ChatGPT thought it was about the rainforest.
Yeah.
It was never about the rainforest.
And we're right back where we started.
And I said, rewrite all of that.
Oh, Anne, this was such a pleasure.
Was it? I don't know.
Did people learn
It
anything?
was for me.
Exactly. Yeah, this has been wonderful. So, Anne, thank you so much. I'd love to have you back sometime specifically to find out whether some of our crazy predictions in the beginning of the show were true. But you are a legend and a rock star, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
To my guest, if you don't know who Anne is, and what you have a book, you have a newsletter. Take this moment to kind of promote what you're.
Oh my goodness. If you go to Google and you type in Anne Handley, I should come up right away. I've been working on that for a number of years through Orbit Media to try to own that page.
Ranked like a champ.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yes, I am the author of Everybody Writes, just came out. The second edition just came out a few months ago. There it is, right there. It is new and improved, and it is 10% funnier. What else? I have a fortnightly newsletter that comes out on Sunday mornings called Total Anarchy, and you can subscribe at annehandley.com/newsletter.
Awesome.
And that's what you got.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you again for joining us, and to our
Thank you,
listeners-
Anne.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, friends.
Yeah.
Thanks,
And to our
C-Team.
listener, I always botch this part up. To our listeners, please like and subscribe. It is our mission with Digital Marketing Masterclass to bring on guests who are changing the world of content marketing. And you are absolutely one of them. Thank you so much. And
Thank
we
you.
will see you next time.